Hello and welcome to the All Things Aviation Pod. This is episode 3. Today we finally have our first guest on the pod. He's an airline captain and also an attorney, amongst many things, such as cool guy with really cool hair. He's also the first aviation guest that I've interviewed on Clubhouse. Our guest today is Captain Dave Johnson. Now, first of all, Captain, thank you so much for doing this. I'm aware that you have a busy schedule, and in fact, you're traveling in a few minutes. You are one of the reasons why I started this podcast. You made me believe it could work. You've been so kind to me since we spoke. You always check in on me. After our conversation on Clubhouse ended, I immediately wished I could go back and listen to our conversation again, but it was nowhere to be found. I promised myself I start a podcast and have you on again. And so here we are. Captain Dave, please take us right to the very beginning of your career. What made you decide to become an airline pilot and how did you go about your journey?
Well, thank you very much, Daps. I'm touched and honored, and my hat is off to you for all of you do. The more I discover about your musician skills and all of the other numerous things that you're into, it really suggests a broad and deep intellect, which makes for a wonderful friend. And I hope we will end up being friends in the long run. My aviation journey, I suppose, started very early in my life. My father was also a pilot. He was an Air Force pilot and an airline pilot. And in fact, we flew together before he retired. We had about 2 years of overlap and flew together as crew members.
Recording in progress.
On the DC-10, if you remember the DC-10 way back in the day. It wasn't so much, and I think I just gravitated toward it, not necessarily because I wanted to be like my dad, though I do, he's a great guy, but it just the lifestyle and all of the things that he got to do and all the places that he got to go and the way that he lived his life we grew up in a community of airline people because my dad was in what we have in America called the Air National Guard or the Air Force Reserve, where you're part-time in the military and then part-time in a civilian role. I don't know if they have that in the in a lot of other countries, but in the US, a lot of pilots who start in the military end up finishing their careers in the reserves. And so I was in that relevant group because it was the neighborhood that we lived in, and our friends were the children of my parents' friends. And so it just seemed like a great lifestyle and a really interesting job and fun. And so I set off to kind of follow in his footsteps by going to the United States Air Force Academy, which, on the counsel of my father was probably the best way to go at the time to get into the Air Force and then get onto the airlines. Though when I went in the Air Force, I thought I would stay. I was very excited and very interested, and I really enjoyed it for the 10 years that I was in. But looking up the stairs at the officers who were in front of me, I could see that they weren't really flying much anymore, and they were doing a whole bunch of things that at the time were not that interesting to me. And they're following the first Gulf War in 1991, there was a big reduction in the size of the American military, and I was allowed to leave a little before my commitment ended. Hired me, and on we go.
Wow, that is such an incredible story. I'll never forget that you told me you used to fly straight in when you got into the military. You were flying big aircrafts. I mean, it was like 1 month in, you did your training, your ground training, and you're flying big aircrafts. That's just the way they trained you back then.
Yeah, and they still do. That I was thinking about this and discussing it, with someone the other day. It's kind of amazing what the military can do, because we have military pilots, and so does all the countries. 200, 300 hours, and you're by yourself in, say, an F-16 or a Eurofighter. And then with about 800 hours total flying time, I was the aircraft commander, left seat pilot of a B-52, flying, 8 engines and 6 crew members and 500,000 pounds. And the capability, the combat capability of that aircraft is legendary and remains so. It's one of the longest operational aircraft in military history. And I left the Air Force with just under 2,000 hours, and you would never get hired with 2,000 hours at a major airline today, just because of the way things are trained and the way things are done. But it's a very specialized need, and so the military trains you for a very specialized thing. Like, nobody lands airplanes on ships, really, but the United States Navy. And there are pilots out there, men and women, doing it every day with 250 hours of total flying time.
Wow.
Landing at night in the weather in an F-18 Hornet or an F-35. It's incredible.
Wow. Yes. I mean, you're right in what you're saying, and you hear very little incidences as well. I've not really come across any news where I've heard of a pilot that made a mistake trying to land on a ship. So it is quite incredible the kind of skill that you need to have to be able to go into the airlines, from the Navy or from the Air Force. When I was going to flight school, I remember I was told that going to the airlines is one thing. Going from the Air Force, you have the cream of the crop, and then they looked at people who are in if you're an astronaut, and then you're just completely out of this world. One could say that you're from space if you wanted to look at it that way. But I remember that the military guys were just the best. The Air Force guys were the best. They had a technical aptitude that most people did not have, and that was a super high advantage. So you're now flying all these many years. One thing that I find fascinating about you is you also practice law. How did that come about?
Well, like I said, our relevant group growing up was airline pilots and airline pilot families and military pilots. And you may or may not remember from the old days, there were a lot of airlines that are no longer with us: Pan American and TWA and Overseas National and TransCarib and Air Afrique, and lots of airlines that no longer exist. And regrettably, some of my father's cohort lost their jobs in their late 40s and early 50s because the airline went out of business. And so luckily they had the military to retire on. But a lot of them, while they were, top-notch pilots, they didn't have other skills to rely on. And others of them as well, including my father, had some medical issues which could have been disqualifying. And he never finished college. He was very intelligent, but not educated in a formal way. And so his strategy with me, because I was kind of a high achiever, and I'm not bragging about that, I just happened to be a really motivated boy, was to not teach me to fly as a youth, but to channel my energies towards school, to channel my energies toward university, because he saw what I later saw was like, it can be an unreliable way to make a living. And when you're out, you're kind of out. If the airline shuts down and you go to another airline, if you get a job, you start at the bottom, because of the way the union operations work. And so, I went to our Air Force Academy, which I guess you would call Sandhurst in the UK, and majored in engineering. I was very ambitious as a youth, and I thought I would be an astronaut. And then the guys who I know are astronauts are so much smarter than me. I realized pretty early that probably was not going to be the path I would take. Astronauts and NASA test pilots and things, like, they're just, off the scale smart, these men and women. And so I got with the airlines knowing full well that I may have to spend some time outside of the airlines during a furlough or during a downturn and earn a living the other way. So I went and got a business degree and a law degree in the early 90s, when we were during a downturn, and the airline was willing to release me for a couple of years on a leave of absence to go and do that. And then I was very lucky in being able to tie my aviation knowledge with my newly acquired legal knowledge to work for an aircraft leasing company. a lot of people don't realize that the airplanes are so expensive that some airlines buy them and can finance them, but a lot of airlines can't, and so they lease them from operating lessors. Most are now based in Ireland, but when I was working, we had some based here in Los Angeles, some based in New York, and I did that part time for a while. And then during another serious downturn, starting in 2003, I went and did it full time until 2015 when I came back to flying. So it was more of a went off on a siding, although I did enjoy it. And again, for a period of time, I did not think I was coming back to flying until the financial crisis kind of unsettled the finance and aircraft leasing industry. And a lot of the very stable, strong companies broke up or moved or reorganized. And the airlines kind of gained some resurgence. And the airline from which I was on leave of absence asked me if I was ready to come back. And I decided that I was. And I don't regret it. It's been fantastic. It's been wonderful. The airline business is a challenging business, and you have to be flexible. But there's just no office that has the view that mine does, and for me, that's very appealing.
Yes, sir. There's certainly nothing like chilling at 37,000 feet, cruising at about 500 kilometers per hour. Nothing beats that night or day, you know.
It works for me. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I talk to some people about what I do, and they're like, "No way."
Do you think that airline coffee is better than Starbucks coffee?
It depends. The level of luxury in the aircraft is definitely associated with the customer. For instance, the 787s, the long haul aircraft, they have espresso makers, not in the flight deck, but in the galley right behind. And that's how we make our coffee. And it is delicious, very high quality. The private jets, if you've ever been on one or ever will be on one, you'll see that they have a very different suite of equipment than a Ryanair 737.
Yeah, for sure.
And for a period of time, United Airlines had a partnership with Starbucks, and they were serving Starbucks coffee, but Starbucks is very product focused, and regrettably the water on the airplanes is not of the quality that the Starbucks thought that they needed, and so they withdrew from the partnership. But
Wow.
I have mine right here.
Yeah, I could tell. Wow, that is
Me
pretty.
too.
Well, there you go. I might be the only one in this group today that has no coffee. Wow, I didn't get the memo, guys. I didn't get this.
Well,
memo.
it's much later for you than it is for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in anything in life, we always sort of like come across obstacles. In your career, in everything that you've done, Captain, what's been the biggest obstacle that you faced, and how have you handled it?
Well, I have to say I've been extraordinarily lucky in that when obstacles presented themselves, other opportunities did at the same time. And I was able to see them and able to pursue them, partly because I had done the preparation, which I was kind of advised by my family and my parents' colleagues to do. And second, because, and this is, I'm unusual in this, is I never had a family and I never got married. So I was always able to make the decisions for myself without, kind of having to incorporate three or four or five other people. And I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I'm only saying that when I was able to pivot because, my backpack was pretty light. And I don't say that in a disparaging way, but my colleagues, that I work with, they have, different roles in their families. And, to the women's credit, a lot of them are working, and a lot of them are working in professional capacities now. And it's kind of been a challenge for the Air Force and the Navy because, traditionally my mom and the other ladies, like the men would get orders and the ladies would pack up the house and move to Germany or wherever their next posting was and show up, 2 months later and with the kids properly dressed and well behaved. And we went through some of that as children. Now the women are pilots, or the women are officers in the military. The women are lawyers or doctors or teachers and things like that. And they can't just pick up and move their careers. I say that because some of my colleagues who were furloughed or off time, their wives or partners became the major breadwinner, and they did the domestic thing. So, the biggest obstacle, I think, in the airline business, there are two. One is opportunity based on the economic environment in the country and the world. And I was able to leave the military at the end of a very long hiring boom. So I secured a position when some of my colleagues from university were not able to, because they filled out their commitments and the airlines weren't hiring anymore. And then when the downturns came in the early 90s and the early 2000s, I just was in the right place at the right time and met the right people who, saw that I could bring something to the table and gave me great opportunities. So, it's kind of have your radar on, kind of prep for the thing that might be next. You and I both know Captain Melinda, and she kind of went through the same thing. The airline business turned down, and she started a real estate business to support her kids. And then she started a financial advisor business. Smart and dynamic and open-minded, I guess.
Yes, sir. Open-mindedness, an interesting word. It's very necessary in our industry, in aviation, because in aviation, it's apparent that change is the only constant. So if you can't keep an open mind, you're going to be stuck in the same place. And this ties in very closely with opportunity, because when an opportunity presents itself and you can't go with the flow or you can't adapt, again, you're out of a job. It feels almost as if you're reading my notes, because I did want to ask you about the correlation of, being an airline pilot and relationships. And I didn't even realize that you never got married. And I think that's really interesting, because being in aviation or becoming an airline pilot puts a strain on most relationships. And quite a lot of all the pilots I know, have either failed marriages or failed relationships. It's just such a career whereby, you're gone a lot most of the time, and keeping a relationship is not the easier thing. I really do appreciate that you shared that with us on this podcast, because that's quite interesting. What do you think the real reason for that is, apart from just being gone all the time? Do you think there's any other factors that contribute to relationships having a hard time when you're in aviation?
I guess there's a couple of categories. I'm in my late 50s, and so the people that you may be thinking of are the pilots when it was predominantly male who retired in the last, 10 or 15 years. And that group went through a lot of divorces. I mean, pilots are a microcosm of it, but my friends that have grown up with, that were lawyers and doctors, they all got divorced too. I think the 70s and early 80s was just the age of a lot of failed marriages, but a lot of successful second marriages. I don't think couples learned to communicate. The 70s was extremely disruptive to traditional households, because women, and I speak for America because it's my relevant experience, because women were allowed, the doors kind of flew open for women to have professional careers and have opportunities and not be dependent on their male partners. My cohort, most of us came out of the military, and many were married to a particular person, either a man or woman, during the military, who got used to that lifestyle, them being gone for extended periods of time and then home for extended periods of time. And then when the airline lifestyle, either they didn't adapt or the relationship didn't survive, they separated and divorced, and then many of them had successful marriages. The group that's probably 10 years younger than me, they all started, where both were professionals, both had professional and personal respect for one another, and they made their decisions as a couple. And so they were very happy with the way, they were happy with the lifestyle. The parents, are either both pilots in some cases, or one is a pilot and one has another profession, at least up to a point, and then they're able to decide that one parent or the other will stay home with the children.
Hmm.
So those tend to be much more stable. People 10 years younger than me are much better men 10, 12 years younger than me are much better communicators, and much better at having balanced relationships with their partners than I think we are. I mean, we learned kind of the hard way. There were a lot of divorces in my cohort as well. And then the guys, my dad's age, there was a lot of divorces in that group.
Yes, I agree. I think that, going back to the 70s, it was a learning period. And that's what was, a lot was happening and you were having to learn. That's why in a lot of these second marriages, they work because you've learned from your mistakes, hopefully. Especially if you're in aviation, you're supposed to learn from your mistakes.
Right.
You don't want to make them a second time, because the second time you make that similar mistake, you might not be alive to tell the story.
Right.
And so therefore, I think my generation and, Nadine and our group were at a point where, because we've seen a lot of, the mistakes in the past, we also are actively working hard at being better, so we're learning to be better communicators. Communication is also very important in our industry, whether you're communicating with ATC or ground crew, or you're communicating to the people in the back behind the cockpit. Communication is essential. Sometimes I think that it should be a skill that's even taught more in schools, because when I went to school, effective communication wasn't even a subject. It was just, you had to be good at talking. You had to learn yourself. But I'm glad that you touched up on that, Captain. A lot of what you do in the airline involves leadership, and I was thinking about this. How much of leadership is taught at the airline, especially when you become an airline captain, and how much of it is an improvisation of your experiences?
It's a little bit of both, and actually it has come to the forefront at the airlines now, because our job has evolved to become an extremely technical job, and the equipment is now so reliable that the things that are causing incidents are very often associated with miscommunication. In other words, did you set the computer the way it's supposed to, and did I verify it, and did we both hear, or all four of us in some cases, from air traffic control what we thought we heard? And then a lot of the incidents are also not caused by the aircraft or its malfunction, but by the people that were carrying, or in some cases, the cargo. And so, I always had the ambition to write an article about this, but my job is really a management job. Okay. First officer can fly the airplane. There's 3 autopilots. The plane can fly itself. It can land itself. Can't take off yet. Can't taxi to the gate yet, but that's coming, right? So my job is to manage and to inform and to make informed decisions that affect myself, the crew members, and the most important people, which is our customers and our passengers, right? We're entrusted with their safety and their comfort. And you see it a lot now that flying is back on after the kind of COVID lockdowns. A lot of disruptions caused by passengers. People haven't flown before, people who are getting on board, the airplanes are all full. So a disruption is a real problem. And then also the facilities are extremely crowded, and so a weather disruption is a big problem. So add it all up, right? You have a full airplane going to a full airport, which is now can't take, and the airlines, for better or for worse, have concentrated in the hubs, right? In the UK, it's Heathrow, Gatwick, CDG in Paris, Schiphol. In the United States, it's Dallas, Atlanta, Houston, Denver, Salt Lake, Philly, and even Chicago's kind of been pulled way down since the COVID. And so a disruption at one of those facilities is huge and long-term impact. It takes, because all the flights are full, it takes days to clear the backlog. So you end up with a lot of tired, angry, uncomfortable people, and that's just a recipe for a passenger disruption.
Wow.
But back to the question that you really asked, is communication is huge there, because I'm the information at the center of the information hub. I communicate with the cabin. I communicate with ATC. I communicate with dispatch. Sometimes I communicate with law enforcement. All of those things when we're really having a disruption, which requires a diversion or something like that. And so you have to set priorities, and you have to understand and identify where risk is in other than the traditional places that we think of, weather, terrain, mechanical systems. They're still there. We manage those a lot better than we used to. Now the risk is associated with miscommunication and people. Wow. So you've identified a very interesting and important topic. We, for the first time this year at my airline, are taking a captain's leadership course, being taught by other captains in conjunction with the union. It had typically and historically been taught in what we call the crew resource management curriculum, where they teach you more in situ than in a formal sit-down course, how to be a good listener, right? Because if you're not hearing the other crew members, you're not going to be able to process that information, and you're not going to be able to make decisions which keep them in the loop as viable contributing crew members.
Wow.
So it's a super important, and it's super important in business. It's super important in everything we do now. We're in the information age.
Yeah, certainly. And it's really good to see that the airlines are now making an effort to introduce leadership as part of the curriculum, teaching people how to be more effective at managing, more effective at listening and communicating the right way. There was one incident a while ago where the main cause of the accident was miscommunication between the captain and the first officer. I think this was back in the day when captains predominantly flew the aircraft, and first officers were just monitoring the flight, and first officers weren't even logging hours back then, because they just, depending on who you flew with and how nice they were to you, you might not log hours, you just might monitor. And then this incident happened, and it was rejigged. The whole system was thought about, and maybe we should allow the first officer fly, and you can trust but verify. So it's really good to see, because in quite a long time we haven't heard of any accidents. Well, in the first world, you hear of quite a lot of incidences in the second and third world, and they're also getting better. Like when I speak to my cohort, I like that word that you've been using. In Africa, they talk about how maintenance is getting better. Most of the pilots get trained in the US and in Europe to ensure safety. Safety is quite important in our industry as well. But it's really good to see that all these changes are happening in aviation. It's really interesting that you mentioned that planes might be able to taxi themselves to the gates, because they can pretty much do a lot of cool stuff. And people that are listening to the podcast or watching, if you're not really in on aviation, yes, planes can fly themselves, pretty much, right? They can land. They just can't take off yet. So I really like that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, automation is a choice to implement by the manufacturers in conjunction with the users, and it's a choice to use for the crew members. One of the things that we really emphasize now, particularly in an unusual situation, is an appropriate level of automation. There are times when the automation helps, and there are times when the automation makes things more complicated. I think the concept that a lot of people have is that, we sit down in the jet, close the door, and push the green button, and the plane flies itself. It's not at that level, though it could be, for lots, because we've made lots of conscientious choices of when we want the crew to be doing certain things and when we want the automation to do certain things. Automation is very good at repetitive and precise tasks. We know that, right? Flying straight and level and following the flight plan. The autopilots are amazing. Making landings in very low visibility, in very specific conditions with very specific nav aids. The airplanes are amazing. The autopilots are incredibly reliable. Not so reliable that we use one. We use either two or three. So there's a backup to the backup often.
Wow.
But then again, you're landing in 50-foot ceiling and 300 feet visibility. But there are times, particularly during operations, when things are changing rapidly and the inputs to the automation take more time and create more confusion than just clicking it off and flying it Cessna style, right? Click the autopilot off, click the auto throttles, set the heading marker, and go to the place where you've been instructed to go by ATC. And this is particularly true at a big airport with lots of traffic when weather conditions are changing. And then let the other crew member catch up, set everything up, then put the automation on when it's been verified. But and again, that's a leadership choice, right? And as the captain, I decide how much I'm going to use when I'm flying, and as the captain, I advise the first officer what I think the appropriate level of automation that he or she should be using as well is.
Yeah, that's incredible. Automation is a form of risk mitigation in aviation, and one of the reasons why we have fewer incidences. So people should feel more comfortable to fly. I rarely come across people who are terrified of flying anymore. I think that there's quite a lot of videos now on YouTube that can put you at ease. I've seen quite a lot of comments, that would say something like, "Oh, I saw the captain or the first officer fly, and he put me at ease that, oh, they're actually working in there. They're essentially, they're doing everything right. There's a checklist." I haven't flown in a long time, but I still live my life by checklists. Every day I kind of write my tasks out because I feel like I won't be accountable to them if I don't. Like, I won't be true to myself. I think the airline instigates that in you, in that when you're doing anything, you check it off. Have I done this? Yes. And you verified it off. And that's one of the important skills that I learned in aviation. So Captain, surely you've flown with quite a lot of people over the years. Have you had any nervous first officers at all? Has anyone ever sat beside you in the right seat and they're going, "Oh, it's my first time flying a 737 or 7, whatever. Have you ever had that?
Not for quite some time, mostly because by the time you're getting to a major international carrier, they're very experienced. Almost always having been captains at regional airlines, flying a 70 or a 90 seat CRJ, which, to be honest, is about the same job as what I do, except that the legs are a little bit longer and the aircraft is a little bit bigger and maybe more sophisticated. Maybe we have some better systems than the Embraers or the Challengers, but they're amazing airplanes too. I mean, they're super sophisticated and they do a lot of the same stuff we do. In the military, you get new pilots, who are sort of straight out of transition training. We would go to Air Force pilot training, and that would finish, back when I did it, with about a little under 200 hours of stick time in a jet. Then you'd go to transition training to learn to fly your particular weapon system, which in my case was the B-52 bomber. And that was probably another 100 hours. And then they would send you to your posting. And in my case, my first posting was Guam. So you have first officer who's out there doing a very complicated mission in a very big airplane, very far from home, out over the balmy blue Pacific with not a lot of experience. Wow. So there were some back then, and probably I was one of them. I mean, I remember the first time I flew as a first officer in the B-52 very low over the water at night at very high speed. I kept pulling the stick back because I didn't like how low the captain was flying. And he said, "It's okay. Let off on the stick. We'll be fine. We do this all the time." I was that guy. I was like, "No, this is scary.
This is not okay. Jeez.
No, I don't see anything."
How fast were you going?
The B-52 was faster than you might think at low altitude. We were allowed to go. They don't fly it down low anymore because we've kind of worn them out. But you were allowed to go 400 indicated.
Wow.
Over the ground.
Wow. Hey. Derek, thank God. Captain.
Hey. Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened.
It's fine. You were perfectly all right. So because this is our first time doing this, Zoom only allows us to record for 40 minutes.
Okay.
In the 40 minutes that we record, they want us to upgrade so that we can do it's fine. We're gonna upgrade to that soon so that we can actually have an hour and a half. Sorry about that. I do apologize.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I thought it was me.
Yes, sir. No, definitely not you. The good news is I'm still keeping an eye on time, and we're not even up to an hour yet. So we're just gonna pick it up right back from where we left off. So sorry about that, sir.
Very good. Oh yeah, I think we were talking about the B-52s and back in the I was flying them
Recording in progress.
in the late 80s, and we were flying low altitude, and we were allowed to fly up to about 400 knots, but military planes are fast, and the B-1, which was the follow-on to that, flew about 700 knots, at the fastest, and then you go to the supersonic ones, and then who knows, and then whatever they've got in the black world that they pull out of the hangars at Nellis at night, we'll never, you and I won't know for a long time.
Yeah, they're flying pretty fast at a low altitude. I'm glad that you said you and I won't know for a very long time, because a lot of what's happening now is that we're hearing about UFOs, and I don't want to be the first to put my tinfoil hat on, but if I were to put my tinfoil hat on, there's quite a lot of news, and even the US government is getting involved now and saying that we're unsure about some of these objects that we're seeing, and quite, from credible sources, airline captains have said, ex-military pilots and sometimes even current military pilots are saying we're seeing these objects that are moving at just, you can't even imagine how they move. We can't even imagine the technology. What are your thoughts on that, Captain? Have you even seen maybe one of these UFOs?
You if you sit and stare at the starry sky at night, and you even talk to any of the physicists on Clubhouse, how vast and complex even our galaxy and the universe is, you've got to think to yourself, we cannot be alone. We cannot possibly be alone. And I
agree
hope,
with you completely.
Yeah, I hope we're not. I hope we're not the best the universe has to offer. And I hope that an advanced society would explore and come and visit and do so in a way that, I watched Star Trek as a kid and I loved it, where the prime directive, do not disturb the advance or, the development of these societies. It would be wonderful if they came and and saw that. There are lots of alternative explanations for what the pilot saw and what was in the video, and I can't explain it. I haven't yet had that experience. I hope that I will. I tell everybody, I want to see a UFO. I want them to come and pick me up, instead of the guy in Kentucky who's milking his cows. and then I want to have a ghost or a haunting, right? Because it'd just be like, then you would know, right? You would know, like, hey, there is a space between what we know now and what the future holds and what happens after, this life ends. So I really hope it's true. The likelihood of having an encounter is extraordinarily small, mostly because they're it's like Men in Black. They're probably here among us and not revealing themselves to see what this what this world is really like, and they're probably doing it in a lot of places, one would hope.
Yeah. If I could nominate anyone in my cohort that I would like for aliens to come in contact with, I think, Captain Dave, you'd be the right man. Yourself and maybe Nadine as well. Nadine, because she's very inquisitive, but you, because you're a cool guy, and I just feel like you would be the one to tell us exactly what went down. And obviously, you'd come back on the pod and tell the rest of the world, and I'll be the first person to have you on. So yeah, that would be great.
They'd put a tinfoil hat on me and say, "You're crazy, man." Maybe Nadine and I can go together. I'll be like, hey, hold up. We got to go pick up Nadine.
Then you'd have to come all the way.
Packed.
Then you'd have to come all the way to the UK.
My
but
backpack is packed.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I don't think the aliens would mind a little across the pond hop to get Nadine, and then we'll go out and see the star. Go out and see the stars for a while, and then come back and do a joint press conference.
It'd probably take them 5 minutes.
I don't mind.
It'll probably take them 5 minutes to cross America to Europe, but that'll be hilarious if that ever happened. But there's quite a lot of that in the news now, and it's an interesting time for a lot of reasons in aviation, in life in general. for over a year and a half, we've been battling a pandemic. And this is one of those subjects that even when I interview people on Clubhouse, everybody has, varying opinions on what's going on, what's
Right,
not happening. In fact,
right.
part of how we met was you came into one of our rooms, and you had something to say about, COVID and vaccines, because at that time I was asking questions about, how many percent of the population needs to be vaccinated before things start to look to going back to normal. And then you came up on stage and you spoke really eloquently. You were very concise, you were succinct, and I thought, I really like how this man speaks. I need to have him on as a guest. And you were in fact the first guest we ever had, and I've said it already at the start of the show. But yeah, the pandemic has been really interesting. It's been really weird as well. Some people would say that it's been really negative for them, but in and during the pandemic, I started 2 podcasts. I started working in radio. I've been doing quite a lot of things. I'm playing a lot of gigs. I'm doing a lot of things. So it's been all right for me. Captain, what's the pandemic been like for you? Obviously, I know you fly, which is still cool because a lot of people also lost their jobs.
Well, ironically, and my hat is off to you for, what we talked about earlier. Is you said, well, I can't do what I was doing, and I like these other things, and there seems to be an opportunity to do it. So this is how I'm going to spend my time productively, even though I'm locked out of and I should know, but I don't know what you did before the pandemic. But I'm locked out of the office, and this is not going to work for me anymore. So let me adapt and pursue these other things. And so, I applaud you for that. In America, the government, for better or for worse, and I'm not taking a stand on this, has recognized that and we have this modern history of government intervention in stabilizing monetary systems and parts of the society, with financial intervention. In 2001, September 11th was the first time that I kind of remember it really happening in an aggressive way. And then, of course, or the second President Bush at the very end, and the first President Obama's first term, they had to do the same thing during the world financial crisis. And some will say that those huge monetary interventions and that huge volume of borrowing will at some point become a problem. But it was a near-term necessity. We've done that again during the pandemic, and the American government has borrowed unprecedented sums of money, as likely has the UK and other countries, to prop up the people, basically the citizens, who need to have certain things. I personally think that was the right thing to do. And we'll see a nice, strong recovery, though maybe not as evenly distributed as might be ideal. But I've been a huge benefactor of that, because the American government recognized that the airlines are like a utility, and if they shrink dramatically in size or collapse, they cannot be rebuilt quickly. The airplanes don't go away, but if the crew members take forever, the facilities take a long time to certify, and it's like an old car. If you don't drive it, it doesn't run, and so they let it run. And there were days when we were flying 1 and 2 and 3 passengers around. The worst I ever had was 1 passenger. Now, I fly domestic, but the international flights, with all the borders closed, they were empty. There was nobody on those planes. They were carrying cargo. Sometimes they had upper deck cargo. Sometimes some airlines, Air Canada, Delta, took the seats out of 777 and puts cargo nets up there, and carried PPE, and carried, things that you can carry on the upper deck that don't require a freighter, to places where nobody was allowed to go, including the UK and Europe for a long time. So for me, early in the pandemic, I had some time off, and I sat here in California, looked at the beach that was closed, and looked at the bike path, which was closed. And I thought, no, I cannot do this. I will do my best to stay safe. I got a Clubhouse, which was a godsend, because you were talking to other people and hearing actual voice, because I live by myself. And so I said, I need to go out and fly. So I flew as much as I could. And during that period, of course, I earned a nice living. We earned a nice salary, thanks to the American government, because really that was just a pass through. And second, I got some hard fought competence because I was flying a lot, going into some challenging places like Mexico City and Puerto Vallarta and Dallas when the weather was bad, and Salt Lake and Denver, and really kind of getting into the books and going to the simulator and flying with a lot of new first officers and flying with a lot of people who hadn't been there before, and flying with a lot of crew members who were scared and uncomfortable, and flying with a lot of passengers who were worried. And so for me, I came out on the other side. I felt like a better, stronger, more accomplished pilot. Financially, I have a small side business which took a big hit, but that's okay because my main focus now is aviation, and that was great. And I have now taken a job as an instructor check airman. So after we get off the phone, or off of this podcast, I'm going back to the training center I'm in the middle of training to be now a right seat instructor pilot, a simulator instructor, and a line check airman. So excited about that. It is the first time that I have instructed in my life, because I didn't stay in the Air Force long enough. My next job would have been to be an instructor pilot in the B-52. And then because I came up through the airlines, I never, like you probably did and do, became an instructor. A flight instructor and a CFI. I never did any of that. In fact, I'm not even rated to fly a single engine airplane, if you can believe that. Because in the Air Force, you go right in, and it's like you're in a multi-engine complex jet. Here you go, young man.
Good luck.
Fun. Yeah, exactly. No. I mean, you get a lot of instruction, but about 30 hours into it, they're like, "You're going solo."
Yeah. See you later. As they say in Ireland, on your bike.
Yeah. So I've never flown I don't have hardly any time in single engine air. So this is a real challenge for me, putting on the instructor hat and putting on the teacher, patient, evaluator hat, just because I've never done it. For me, it's always been like leap into something else, leap into something else, leap into something else. Ideally, it will open up opportunities for me to teach in some capacity when I retire from flying. I've sort of fantasized about going back to either the Air Force Academy or to UCLA Law School and teaching law in some capacity. Wow. Or business. But again, those are very accomplished, highly credentialed people. And it's like the astronauts that I know, like I just don't measure up. So
yes, you do. You definitely do.
It's a very specialized thing that they do. And so I've been lucky in that I've gotten to do a lot of things, and I appreciate your confidence. But being a law professor is a real specialty and an art, and there just aren't that many jobs for it. So, maybe I'll be able to convince the dean somewhere to let me teach legal research or something and go from there. Because that's how I've always gotten my, I've always wedged my foot in the door and said, well, let's just let me do this little piece of it, and then we'll see how it goes. And I've had excellent bosses who have said, all right, we'll give it a try.
Captain Dave, congratulations and a massive well done on your achievements on now becoming an instructor. This is massive. How I wish I could be under your tutelage, one day, whether it's an online course that you start to teach. I will sign up. I need to learn. If you're teaching business, I will sign up. It's just I could listen to you speak for a very long time. I'm very happy for you. And
thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited too, but a little trepidation too, because it's a new skill and it's a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. As a line check airman, what would you look for in the ideal pilot? So what is it that you pass on to people that you're trying to educate? What is it exactly that you're looking for, sir?
Well, you hit on it, right? Is of course, you have to understand the systems of the aircraft. You learn that from a book, and we check them. It's not as important as it used to. It's not as emphasized as it used to be. I'm not saying it's not important, but there's a lot of stuff about the systems. You just can't do anything about it, right? Sitting in the pilot seat going 500 miles an hour. So the emphasis now is really on procedures, really on understanding what the procedures are, how they tie in, and where things go wrong. So, and again, you hit on it as well, is communication. Communication. I brief my co-pilots, look, we're sitting here at the gate, first day of a 3-day trip, we're blasting off out of LAX, and I tell them, I will make a mistake and you will catch it. You must tell me about it. I insist that you tell me when I've done something that's not according to procedure, or that, puts us in jeopardy, or that you're uncomfortable with, right? Because there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, diverting around weather, making these changes, minimum equipment list items, briefings. Are you comfortable with that? Let me know, because what I don't want to do is put up a huge safety wall between myself and the first officer, because it's just us two, she and I. And I don't want her or him to be in any way, shape, or form intimidated about saying, I don't understand what we're doing right now, or I'm uncomfortable with this.
Yeah.
So, as I say, it's a knowledge and information and a highly technical job that we do now. So what's essential is that both pilots understand what's happening and have an open line of communication when they don't. Also, part of my briefing is I follow the procedures. I do things by the book. The reason I do things by the book principally is I think it's the right way to do things, but two, I'll be predictable for you, right? So if I'm sitting there, you're expecting me to do something, it's called for in the procedure, and I haven't done it, it means I forgot. And it's okay to say something. In fact, it's essential for you to say something. And so, I think that's really what we're emphasizing now is everybody who makes it to a major airline has a stick and rudder skills. Everybody who makes it to an airline is already checked out on numerous complex aircraft and flown them in very bad weather conditions. When they are not performing, it's usually something's up here. They're having some trouble at home. There's some things that are on their mind that means they're not fully committed to the learning environment. That said, there are some things we need to familiarize them with, and the only way to do it is to go there, fly to Guatemala City, fly to Mexico City, fly to London City Airport, fly to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or Denver. That's when they want somebody who's been there and experienced with them for the first time. Transitioning from the right seat to the left seat, the challenge can be pacing, right? Because when you're the first officer, you're kind of waiting for the captain to say, hey, do the checklist now, or what do you think about this? And then when you move over, you're kind of not used to saying, all right, I'm setting the pace now. And so everyone's looking at you saying, what are we doing? And so that's what we help them with. But it's just a mindset. It's just a mindset of, okay, now I'm the pace setter. Now I'm the coach. Now, not I'm the captain, we'll do it when I say. It's I'm the captain, let's do it at the right time. And if there's a reason to change it, then let's change it. And I will explain why I'm not doing that the way that you're expecting, and get their buy-in. I mean, because that is essential to get buy-in. It doesn't work anymore to say, I'm going to do this even if you don't like it. It just doesn't work anymore in the business that we're in.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And this is all very relevant as well, because, when we consider mental health and how it's becoming more and more relevant in our lives today, I've talked about this before, about how, if you're flying, whether at a corporate level, privately in general aviation, or in an airline, you need to check yourself. So there's that I'm safe checklist that goes through a couple of things that you need to ensure that you're good with, because if you're not feeling your best, whether physically, emotionally, or whatever the case might be, you certainly don't want to be responsible for a huge aircraft with a ton of people in the back who have other businesses to attend to. You need to be the best version of yourself every single time. Captain, when you work at a major airline, how much is done in looking after a pilot's mental health? Are the airlines investing in this? Are there courses you can take, or is that just left to the individual to look after for themselves?
It's such a great question, and it's such a relevant issue for just the reasons that you've identified, because it's so much about knowledge and mindset to really be on your game when you come and do this thing that we do. And really, honestly, it's true in a lot of cases. I'm very interested in this, and we may have discussed this before, but one of the things that I do as a side, not a hustle, but as a volunteer gig is online crisis counseling. There's an organization, and they're just now active in the UK and Ireland, called Crisis Text Line, which is basically a suicide and crisis hotline, where instead of answering a phone and talking to someone with their voice, they text, because young people are either really used to communicating via text, or they're in a place where they can't talk on the phone. They're intimidated. And I've learned a lot about active listening. I've learned a lot about meeting people where they are. I've learned a lot about getting people to open up about stuff in the right circumstances. And pilots are typically, for better, for worse, male, for better, for worse, straight, for better, for worse, white. And the tropes about straight white pilots are all true. Like, we do not talk about our emotions unless it's about our dog, or the airplane that we love that they retired, the 757, right, or the 747, or whatever, F-16, whatever you loved. And we are the leaders. We are the strong ones. We are the pillars of strength. And so these guys, and I include myself in this sometimes, I'm getting better, will have a hard time asking for help. And for better or for worse, mental health in America and probably Western Europe is not viewed in the same light as physical health, right? If you saw somebody crash their bike and break their leg, you wouldn't say like, hey, come on, get up and walk it off. You'll be fine tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Let's go get a beer. You just wouldn't say that. You would never say that. You'd call 911, let's go to the, thing. You're obviously swollen. We know what these things look like. Here's some medication. Here's a treatment. Of course you need some time off of work. You can't go to work the day after breaking your leg. We don't adopt that view for mental health largely in America. It is getting better. It is getting more normalized. That said, we are cognizant of the mental health and mental acuity requirements of our job. We watch each other, and then we have an in-house organization that's run as a partnership between our union and the company, where you can go to the confidential counseling, pilot to pilot, and get some help off the record. Because I think the other thing, and it's not entirely clear what happens with respect to your medical certification if you admit to and undergo treatment for mental health. It depends on the situation. It depends on what medications are administered to you. It is allowable in America for pilots to take antidepressants. There is an observation period. There is a treatment period. There are all of those kind of things. So it's a huge issue. It's really becoming now. That said, I think also pilots are very cognizant of, my head is not here today. I do not belong here, and I'm going to stay home, and I'm going to call my chief pilot, and my chief pilot 100% will be like, you do not belong in an airplane. Call me when you're ready. And he has done that before when I've had, I was closing on a house and it got really complicated, and I was supposed to go away on a 3-day trip, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're at that age where we start to lose parents. We're at that age when, sadly, some of my colleagues have lost children. And those are devastating events. and we're open to the idea that you shouldn't be doing in an airplane when you're in that mental health situation. So it's evolving for the better, but it's probably behind where it needs to be.
And that's really important because, I mean, the fact that we're talking about it is all that really matters at this point is shedding more and more light. And I'm excited for this conversation, Captain, because a lot of people are hopefully going to listen to this and they're going to listen to your perspective on some of these subjects and some of these questions that I've asked you. And hopefully, the mental health part of the conversation is one that people can be inspired by to do better, to listen to other people. At my age now, 29 years old, I'm very conscious and aware of who I am and what I want to do with my life. Well, maybe let me retract that statement. So I'm still trying to find my purpose in life, but I'm very aware of people and their feelings. And I think at a certain age, I did not know or care about how people felt or what they were going through. But now, every single day, I'm very careful about how I use my words, my actions, before I get involved in road rage. Maybe this guy is just having not the best day. The more we talk about these things, the more of a culture that we're going to form so that, in 5, 10, 15 years from now, community, we can be at a place in our lives where we truly understand emotions to a high standard, because obviously mental health is still very new. The study of it, the psychological aspect, the counseling aspect, a lot of people in these fields are still learning. And I'd imagine that in 20, 30 years from now, we're going to be further advanced. But I like that we're talking about this because it means that if anyone is watching or listening, if you need to speak to somebody, feel free to do so. Like Captain Dave said, you don't have to feel like, you're keeping it in. The more you keep it in, the more it hurts. Just talk to somebody, go out and do something positive. And, Captain, you're a great example of someone who took the pandemic, who took lockdown and created other ventures. You created other opportunities for yourself. So I'd like to, encourage people that are listening or watching, the pandemic was not great for obvious reasons, but it's also enough time for you to do other things as well. Captain, I'm quite conscious that, you're going to be heading off soon. I still have a couple more questions, so I thought I'll maybe ask them, and then once you're ready to jump off, we will wish you happy landings. So Captain, what's your favorite destination? You've been to quite a lot of places, a lot of airports. What's your favorite destination? Let's talk about it in two parts, in terms of just the coming into land, because obviously you're sitting in the left seat. So coming into land, what's your favorite, approach, and just city or country?
Well, a lot of people ask me that, and it's different for a lot of reasons. Of course, flying into LaGuardia, flying at night along Manhattan down the river is amazing. It's amazing. It's like you're Peter Pan and flying around London at night. It's beautiful. It's dynamic. It's it's everything that they say it is. I personally, as a pilot, really enjoy the big facilities where they're super busy and you have to know what you're doing. And they have their own specific lingo and they have their own specific operational parameters. DFW is one of them. Atlanta is one of them. Chicago used to be. They pulled it down a little bit. JFK, where it's clear this is the big leagues. You got to know what you're doing. Everybody's got to know what they're doing, or it's disruptive. It's not unsafe. It's just disruptive, and it slows everything down. I like the challenge of landing in very bad weather. It really zones you in. I tell new people and brief them like, this is the worst weather you're ever going to land in. You're going to make your best landing because you're going to be 100% laser focused on what you're doing. That's going to feel really good when you're done. So I love the big airports. I love the big airports. Airplanes coming and going, and you see every tail. LAX is that way a lot. You see every tail. You see every airline. You have to know what you're doing. Facilities are crowded. You have to speak concisely. That I find very exciting. That I find very thrilling. O'Hare is famous for having very complicated taxi instructions, and those who go there all the time know what they mean, know how to respond. And I'll never forget the first time I was checking out as a first officer, and my first leg was out of O'Hare in a FK 100, which we don't fly anymore. Pull up to the top of the alley, and give us taxi instructions. And I had no idea what the controller was saying. And I look over at the Czech airman and he says, "Just say Roger."
Roger.
I was like, Roger. I had no idea what was, but he, of course, been flying there for years, so he knew everything. He knew that lingo. So, I love those places. I also love Hawaii. If you haven't been to Hawaii, you really have to put Hawaii on your destination list. There's no place like it. Probably Tahiti's the same. I just haven't been there yet. I haven't flown a lot in Europe, a little bit, as an operational crew member, but as a destination, a place to go to, Paris is one. I always say, I always describe, people always say, where should we go? And I say, it depends on what experience you want to have. What experience do you want to have? Do you want to have the dynamic city environment? Go to New York City, go to Las Vegas, go to Paris, go to San Francisco. They're walkable, old, interesting, not Vegas so much, but interesting cities where you just feel the energy. You cut the energy with your bare hand. It's just everywhere. If you want to have a little more relaxing, some of the Caribbean islands are nice. I personally like South Florida, Miami Beach, because you can be in it or out of it depending on what you're feeling. And then I really like environmental destinations. Early in my career, well, I've always been interested in animals and nature and conservation and things like that. There's an organization called Earthwatch, and I've done 3 participative research projects with Earthwatch. It's earthwatch.org, and I highly encourage you to take a look at it. But the first one I did was in central Indonesian Borneo, where we went and participated in a long-term study on orangutans. So many people know Louis Leakey's Angels. So Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey are famous because movies were made about them. They're very prominent in the media. What they do is super important. But the third one, it was a Canadian woman named Birute Galdikas, and she went off to Indonesia, to deepest, darkest Borneo to study what at the time was viewed as the third species of great apes. We now know there are 4, and she's been there for 50 years and living and studying and doing long-term conservation and working with the government. And that was an incredible experience. And I later did one with the whale sharks in Baja, legitimate research, but we also were in the water with them doing tagging, doing skin samples, catching plankton, seeing what they're eating. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you do research on animals, a lot of what you do is find out where they ate and pick up their poop and take it apart and look in it. What do they eat? And, you look at it under a microscope and, are they well? And, find out what's unique about scat, right? Yeah. It's just how research is. People don't get it. It's like when you have a baby, you have to deal with the poop.
Yeah, that's pretty much
and
it.
Then the most recent one I did was 2013, and it was with the leatherback turtles in Costa Rica. Amazing experiences. But back to your question, is a place like Galapagos, a place like Antarctica, it's going to be an experience that is like none other. There's no place like Galapagos. There's no place like Antarctica. There's no place like the Okavango Delta or the Ngorongoro Crater or the Great Rift Valley. There's no place on Earth like that. Those are incredible experiences. And being in the travel industry really avails one to access to those things, both because it's a fairly financially rewarding business and you're used to travel and you have access to it.
Wow, that is incredible. Nadine traveled quite a lot because she worked as a flight attendant at a major airline in the UK for about 4 years.
Congratulations!
And she's
that's a hard job, you guys. That's a hard job.
Nadine can tell you all about it.
It's very stressful. You need a lot of patience.
Stressful. You do. You really do.
Yeah.
And you need to have a great relationship between yourself and the pilots and vice versa. Captain, one of my favorite quotes or favorite aviation quote is once you've tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your head turned skywards. I love that quote so much because I earned my PPL at age 19 in Florida Institute of Technology.
Hey,
Hey,
well done.
thank you. That was in Melbourne in 2011. It was the proudest moment of my life when I got passed my check ride by Professor Dan Beard. Professor Dan Beard was known at Florida Institute of Technology Aviation as one of the tougher um, CFIs, if you will. He was a professor of aviation as well. And it always meant that if you had Professor Dan Beard, you should be either worried or very good at what you're doing. Um,
Right.
I did well, passed first time. And yeah, I felt like throughout my training during my private pilot's license, the moment I tested flight, I just knew that this is something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Captain, are there any such quotes that have stuck with you in your impressive career throughout the years?
Um, it, when I went to the Air Force Academy and the other military academy, graduates will tell you that during the first year, one of the things they make you do is memorize all of this fourth class knowledge. Who's the president and who's the chief of staff, and all of the Air Force inventory. And we have a little book that we have to carry in our back pockets the whole year and recite knowledge. And it's an experience. It helps you think under pressure and things like that. But they had us memorize a lot of quotations, and one of them I ended up having engraved on the inside of my class ring, at least the beginning of it, and it's from Field Marshal Rommel, who is, while he did work for the Third Reich, he is viewed as one of the great military strategists and great military leaders in history. And let me see if I can remember it all. But it starts off as: be an example to your men in your duty and in your private life. Never spare yourself, and let the troops see that you don't in your endurance of fatigue and privation. Always be tactful, well-mannered, and teach your subordinates to be the same.
Wow, that is powerful. Captain, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an incredible and for me, an emotional conversation with you. You are truly someone that I look up to, someone that although I've never met, I can truly say you're a gentleman. As you stated at the start of the conversation, I truly hope that the way our path will course, hopefully it will be of one where we do meet each other in the future and we can sit down and have a drink and have a laugh. And I hope Nadine will be by my side as well. Due to Zoom constraints on this particular episode, they don't give us a
Yeah.
lot of time to talk, but we will fix that. As we're only just getting started, we will fix that. Captain, just before you go, sir, where can people reach you on social media so that way they can be part of your incredible journey?
I'm on Instagram only at this point. It's at P Dave Johnson, and I'm happy to hear from people. Happy to share what I have. It's a private account, so I do screen before they go in. But I'm happy to I share some aviation photos, things like that. I'm also happy to get DMs. People who are in the Los Angeles area, people who are in the Dallas area, people who want advice on careers, aviation, and stuff. I am on LinkedIn as well. But there's a lot of Dave Johnsons on there. So if you do Dave or David Johnson, when I was an executive, people would reach out to me and ask me for counseling or advice and stuff, and I would always agree to 30 minutes.
Hmm.
I'll always do a 30-minute phone call if you are prepared, and I'll give you I'll ask you a couple of questions before, and probably give you some homework, and set a 30-minute limit to see, because then the person really has to distill what do they want to ask you, right? And a lot of busy people have this challenge is people want to call and say, oh, you will too, can I pick your brain? And Nadine and I are going to let the aliens pick our brain. But for people who are looking for advice,
Recording in
hilarious.
progress.
Hello. Hey, honestly,
Hello.
I Captain Dave is amazing, isn't he?
Yes.
We've said our bye byes. Let me just see. He mentioned thanks to you and Nadine. And wow.
So he's put me forward. He's put me forward for my brains to be picked.
He has. I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not literally, but yeah, it sounds like when the aliens do get here, you guys are first on that list, and you can tell me all about it on the
Yeah, it
podcast.
looks like it.
I don't have any particular intentions to have my brains picked, but I'll definitely be happy to interview you when you get back.
Well, he said swing by London, didn't he? So
Yeah, yeah,
my backpack is packed.
yeah. You're ready. That's good. It was a fun episode, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
We learned that we need to go premium with Zoom. We've been using the free version of Zoom, and this is what I said whilst you were off air, Nadine. I'm going to leave all of this in the recording. I'm not going to delete any point where things were cut off, because I was saying quite a lot of stuff when it cut off, and that's who I really am. And I feel like if I edit any of that out, I would make myself look perfect, or people might think I'm perfect, and I'm not perfect. So I said quite a lot of things that I'm going to leave in. Thankfully, nothing rude, but you could really see how I handle pressure. Captain Dave was incredible, and I know we didn't get a chance to say bye-bye properly on the pod.
No.
But before we close things out, I wanted to say, again, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a safe flight to where you're going to, where you're headed for training. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Hopefully we're going to do one of these episodes in person. I can't wait for that to happen. And yeah, just keep inspiring. He's such an incredible person. But Nadine, we've got about 7 minutes to finish our episode, and I'm sure that you had a couple of things to add as well.
First things first, I know where an Irish pub is most places around the world.
That's cool.
So wherever we meet Captain Dave on our travels, I'm pretty sure, 90% sure, I know where an Irish pub is.
That's cool.
So.
This is valuable knowledge. This is incredible. This is one of those knowledge that you can't even pay for. It's like just and this is incredible, because the taste of the Guinness will tell whether because you can have an Irish pub anywhere in the world. Nigerians, we have our version of Guinness. But the taste of the Guinness will tell, because now I've never drank Guinness in Ireland, but I'm quite familiar with people will tell you.
Excuse me?
I've never drank Guinness in Ireland.
Never had.
Never, honestly, never.
I'm sure you're Irish.
I am Nigerian. I'm Irish by naturalization.
Right, your accent says to me Irish.
Yeah. Accent can say one thing. Have you never heard of an actor?
Anyway, I find that shocking.
Yeah,
I find that shocking.
Now, this is one thing I would say. I have enjoyed 2 pints of Guinness in my entire life, and they've been in the UK. The one place that I should have never. Well, I mean, I suppose. Look, I tried it out, and so I've had, and I didn't have them at the same time because I don't drink heavily or mostly at all. I've enjoyed red wine in the past. I think there's a correlation between red wine and it being an antioxidant. Being good for you.
They need to revoke your Schengen pass. That's ridiculous. I've never had a Guinness in Ireland.
I am looking forward to going to Temple Bar and having a pint. I'll have a pint. As I said, I don't drink much anyway, but I'll definitely have a pint because I want to see because everybody that's been to Ireland has had a Guinness in Temple Bar. Temple Bar is an area, a part of Dublin that's very popular for tourism and just
along the river,
live
isn't
music
it?
Along the quayside. Yes, so music and everything. It's
I think
great.
I know exactly where that bar is.
The Guinness
I
factory.
know where it is.
Guinness factory is not far from Temple Bar. It's literally like 6-minute walk. And Temple Bar is where I spent quite a lot of my time gigging in my early 20s before I moved to the UK. But I'll tell you what. I promise you, Nadine, if we ever go to Dublin together, Okay, which is not a matter of if. When we go to Dublin together, hopefully for the purposes of All Things Aviation Pod, we might be bringing an event to a city near you in Ireland. Sneaky plug. But when we do go to Ireland, I promise you we will have, I'll have a pint of Guinness with you just to try it out, and then we can compare it against everywhere in the world. You need to find O'Leary.
I need to find O'Leary. Yeah, he's not going to be happy with this. No pilot is going to be happy with this at all. I need to find O'Leary. He needs to have
listen.
He needs to have some words with you. I'm disappointed.
Let's leave O'Leary out. Don't snitch on me to O'Leary. I thought we were friends. Don't tell him.
Snitching. Okay,
how about this? Seeing as you're my friend, why don't you let us go to Ireland? I'll have that pint of Guinness before you tell anybody. So at least that way, nobody knows. That's what friends do. There's been times in our friendship, Nadine, when I've looked out for you as my sister and I've said, I'll look after you. So this is the one time you will promise me not to tell Michael O'Leary anything if we do meet Michael O'Leary. Now, we know people who know Michael, don't we? People who know him quite well. I mean, a lot of people in the aviation industry, if you're at a higher management level, probably have met Michael. But I know people that know him and they've been a part of our shows in the past. But hopefully we're going to bring them back on. And then, we can talk about aviation. Nadine,
I'm not convinced, but okay.
About the pint of Guinness, I promise you. What do you guys think? You, the audience, what do you think? In the comment section below, let us know if I should be forgiven for having lived in Ireland for almost 16 years and never had a pint of Guinness. I did grow up in a predominantly, well, not even predominantly. My parents are Christians, and we were raised to not drink, and that's a lot of the reasons why I don't drink. When I do indulge in some red wine, my thoughts on that is just, it's good for you, so I have it once every 3 months. But my parents were quite not strict. They're lovely. My parents are lovely, but they just didn't raise us to drink. So it took me a long time to come around to being okay with myself. And when I do have a pint, which I've only had 2 pints of Guinness in my life, and it was not in Ireland. Speaking of which,
I'm one of them in Ireland.
No, I'm Nigerian. I can't wait to go to Nigeria and have Nigerian Guinness. I've been told that Nigerian Guinness is unreal. So, but I don't know. I've never had it. So we should go to Nigeria and do that.
You can get Nigerian Guinness in the supermarket in London.
Oh, can you?
Yes.
Oh, wow. But that's the thing, though.
It's quite common down here.
But let me ask you something, Nadine. Isn't that the thing though with Guinness, is that like people always say when you drink Guinness, like in Temple Bar, where it's so close to the factory, to the brewery, it tastes just different. I wouldn't know. I've never done it. But people always go, it's the best you'll ever have. Once you're having it in a different country or it's in a bottle, I think it's different. When it's just being made.
Maybe. I haven't had Guinness in Ireland, but then again, I haven't spent that much time in Ireland to have that.
Well, let's make it part of.
I'm assuming.
That it's
I'm assuming it will have a nice fresh taste.
Okay, well, sounds like
when we make Guinness Punch as well, it tastes very good.
Very good. Yeah, sounds like we have a motive for next time when I come down to London. But to everyone who has listened to this podcast today, we really truly hope that you've enjoyed it and that you've taken something away. We're going to jump off now. It's been fun to sit down and podcast. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share our content on social media. So if you're watching on YouTube, just give us a thumbs up and definitely subscribe. That will go a long way. And if you're on Instagram, please subscribe to our page at All Things Aviation Pod. Again, thank you guys so much for your time, Nadine. Thank you very much as always. And we will catch you guys again, hopefully this time next week. Take care. Bye-bye.